Alright, so before we get into the video, I just want to show you guys something real quick. 96% of you guys are not subscribed, and that is
No bueno.
if you do see this video and you keep seeing me in your recommendations, you know, like the featured or whatever, make sure you hit that subscribe button because it only takes 2 seconds and it does help motivate me to make more videos for you guys because I truly do like making videos. But let's get into the video. Is part 2 of the NFL offseason grades, and now today's course is about the NFC and the AFC South grades. If you have not watched the other ones about the AFC and the NFC North teams, go check that out real quick and then hop back on this video. But it is basically about the same exact rules as the other video. You know, it's about 85 to 90% of the transactions, about the coaching transactions, the major moves, the major trades, whatever, and it don't involve a lot of the lower end signings like the players that basically nobody knows about. But let's get into the video. Starting off with the first team of the NFC South, we are repping the Buccaneers shirt today. We're going to be talking about the Bucs first. And their main coach position changes were, you know, the offensive coordinator. They went from Dave Canales, he went to the Panthers head coach, and then Liam Cohen is their new offensive coordinator. He was like from college or something like that. Their main additions were Jordan Whitehead, Brandon Gregory, Bryce Hall, and Ben Bredesen, the offensive lineman. Their main losses were Carlton Davis, Shaquille Barrett, Devin White, and David Moore. And now the Bucs, you know, they had a kind of a boring offseason. Their main goal was to keep Mike Evans, Baker Mayfield, Antoine Winfield Jr., and, you know, Levante David. So they at least kept all of those players. But in order of doing all that, they kind of went broke. They're about $500,000 just under the cap, which is by far the worst in the league as of right now. And like I said, you know, their main goal was to just re-sign all those players. And they got a couple new players on defense, but their secondary, like the cornerbacks and the linebacking position, is definitely, you know, tight. I give the Bucs offseason grade a C+. The only reason why a C+ is that the offense is still in really good condition, but their defense is looking a little shaky, especially that secondary. Their safeties are good, but the cornerbacks, bro, they got a lot of work. So I give the Buccaneers a C+. The New Orleans Saints is the next team we're talking about. Their main coaching changes was the offensive coordinator went from Pete Carmichael to Clint Kubiak, which I think honestly that's a huge upgrade for them. So hopefully their offense is at least a little bit better next year. Their main additions were Chase Young, Cedric Wilson, Willie Gay, and of course the GOAT Nathan Peterman. And their main losses were Malcolm Roach, Jameis Winston, and Isak Yadim. He was a cornerback, actually a former Packer. And of course, we all know about the Saints and their cap situation. As of right now, they're about $9 million under the cap, but already projected for next year, it's $71 million over the cap. I swear, they're like every year it seems like they have cap hell. I don't know how they do it, honestly. But I do think that Cedric Wilson is a small upgrade over Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas is the current free agent, you know, and Cedric Wilson is an okay wide receiver, but Michael Thomas, you know, he can never play on the field. So I think that's why it's a small upgrade, if I had to be honest. I give their offseason grade a C, and now they did get Chase Young for a 1 year, it's like a $10 million deal, and I think that's a pretty good little deal, even though Chase Young is, you know, hyped up player, overrated player per se, but I think their defense is in pretty good situation. Even with all the Marshawn Lattimore trade rumors, I don't think he's gonna get traded, but there's a possibility he could get traded. But I give the Saints offseason grade a whopping C. The Carolina Panthers are a team that had a lot of moves this offseason. So their head coach, he went from Frank Wright to Dave Canales, you know, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers former offensive coordinator. And they traded, not traded, but they changed GMs. They went from Scott Fiddler to Dan Morgan. So I guess that's a massive move. Now, bear with me here. They had a lot of acquisitions. Deontay Johnson, Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, Ashawn Robinson, Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Wonnum, Jordan Foyer, and Josh Nijman. And there's actually a couple more other players I didn't even name. But their main losses was, of course, Brian Burns, Dante Jackson, Frankie Louvu, Gatir Motus, Shaquille Griffin, Jeremy Chin, and Von Bell. Now, I will admit, the Panthers are probably one of the most active teams during the offseason. I think, honestly, if I had to be honest, their offseason was pretty good. They definitely addressed the offensive line, which is by far the worst in NFL last year. They added Robert Hunt and a couple other people. But their D definitely took a massive hit, especially with Brian Burns now gone, Frankie Louvu, and their trade with Brian Burns was completely caca. So yeah, their defense took a massive hit, but their offensive line should be a lot better for Bryce Young. I do say their wide receivers upgraded just a little bit with the Deontay Johnson trade, but I give the Panthers a B minus here. And like I said, their team they have a lot of work on, but I do think the offensive line is in really good shape now. And granted, their team's still a lot of question marks around it, if I had to be honest. But their offseason grade is a B minus. The Atlanta Falcons are the last team of the NFC South, and now, of course, their head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator, their whole coaching, honestly, just completely got revamped. Arthur Smith is now the head coach of the... I'm sorry, not Arthur Smith. I was reading it wrong. Raheem Morris is now the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. And their new offensive coordinator is Zach Robinson. He's also from the Rams as well. And the defensive coordinator, Jimmy Lake, is from the Rams as well. So basically, Raheem Morris brought his whole crew over to the Atlanta Falcons. Their main additions were Kirk Cousins, Rondale Moore, Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod, and Charlie Werner. Ooh-wee. And their main losses were Desmond Ridder, Jonnu Smith, Cordell Patterson, Jeff Okudah, and Van Jefferson. So I think they had a massive upgrade this offseason. But I really do think that just because of the completely revamped offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, their whole coaching is a complete different story. I think that's going to change a lot in that Falcons building. And of course, the major upgrade at the quarterback position with Kirk Cousins. He's a lot better than Desmond Ridder, in my opinion. Well, actually, a lot of people's opinions, but they're about $6 million under the cap right now, and their grade is for sure an A. I think they completely readdressed the wide receiver room with Drake London. Now they got plenty of other weapons on there. This defense is going to be even better next year if they can draft, really good cornerback or defensive lineman with their 8th overall pick. Definitely an A for the Falcons. Moving on to the AFC South, we're going to start off with the Houston Texans. And now this is my opinion, the team that had the best offseason in the NFL. Of course, their main additions are Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, Danielle Hunter, Azeez Al-Shahir, Danico Autry, and Tim Settle. And their main losses were Malik Collins, Jonathan Grenard, Sheldon Ranking, Blake Cashman, Devin Singletary, and George Fant. But if I had to be honest, like I said, they completely just revamped their whole team. They got way better on defense. And they started off the free agency period with like $70 or $80 million to spend. And as of right now, they're only $7 under the cap, or $7 million under the cap. And they spent a lot of money this offseason. But if I gave them anything under an A, I'd be crazy. So definitely an A plus for the Texans. I'm really looking forward to them and see how they play next year. Moving on to the next team is the Indianapolis Colts. And now, if I had to be honest, they went from the Texans to the Colts. This is a huge jump in difference and all that. The Colts had a really boring offseason. Their main additions were Joe Flacco and Raquan Davis. I think he was like a linebacker or something. And their main losses were Gardner Minshew, Zach Moss, and Isaiah McKenzie. And like I said, their main goal was to re-sign basically all of their players, like Julian Blackmon and Michael Pittman Jr. They're about $17 million under the cap right now. And, as long as Anthony Richardson can stay healthy, this team is a really good team. It's just like they had a really boring offseason. I give them a C minus. Moving on to the Titans, they had a complete revamped coaching staff, just like the Falcons were. Their head coach went from Mike Vrabel to Brian Callahan, which, if I had to be honest, I don't like that move at all. Their offensive coordinator is now Nick Holtz, and their defensive coordinator is now Denard Wilson. And now they had a lot of new acquisitions. They got L'Jarius Sneed, Calvin Ridley, Lloyd Cushenberry, Tony Pollard, Chidobe Awuzie, Kenneth Murray, and Mason Rudolph. And of course, their main loss was basically Derrick Henry, one of the biggest blows of the team for now. And Azeez Al-Shahir is also another big blow. And they also lost Sean Merton-Bunting, Aaron Brewer, and Danico Autry. And now the Titans also, they had a really weird offseason. They got like a lot of good players, but then they lost a lot of good players also, like, Derrick Henry, Danico Autry, and all that. I give their offseason grade a B minus. I think that, they did address their couple positions like cornerback. They, of course, lost Derrick Henry, but they also replaced him with Tony Pollard. The Titans are going to be a really, I think they're going to be a below average team next year. I could be wrong. They could completely just ball out the next, whole year. But I give them a B minus, even though they're about $31 under the cap. I just don't really like the head coach moving at all. I think that was a massive downgrade. So the Titans, a B minus. The Jacksonville Jaguars are the last team we're talking about today. And now their coaching changes. They went from Mike Caldwell to Ryan Nelson as their defensive coordinators. So they changed the defensive coordinators. Their main additions were Mac Jones, Eric Armstead, Gabe Davis, Darnell Savage, Mitch Morse, Ronald Darby, and Devin Duvernay, the wide receiver. And then their main losses were Calvin Ridley, I have the name written wrong here. Darius Williams, Rashawn Jenkins, and Brandon McCannis. And now the Jaguars, they had a couple of really good pieces on the offensive side they signed, like Darnell Savage and Eric Armstead. They improved the wide receiver position just a little bit by adding Gabe Davis. I do think he's a little bit better of a wide receiver than Calvin Ridley. Now, I could be completely wrong, and the money also says I'm wrong, but I think otherwise. But they basically replaced every position that they lost. Like I said, they added wide receiver. They added a couple of defensive players. I give the Jacksonville Jaguars grade a B here, and I think that, their team was already, pretty good position as it was last year. And like I said, they lost a couple of players, but then they kind of revamped it with a couple of other players they signed, like Gabe Davis, Darnell Savage. The Jaguars are going to be also a team that should be good next year if Trevor Lawrence can stay healthy. But if Trevor Lawrence does not do good this year, I think he might be on the cutting block. I could be wrong, since now they added Mac Jones. But that wraps up this video. If you do like it, hit that like button, comment down below your biggest reaction of this video, your biggest, reaction towards the AFC and the NFC South teams. And yeah, I'm out of here. Deuces.